Are you suffering from a case of new year, same finances? If so, and this is the year you want to take control of your money instead of feeling like it's controlling you, make sure to watch until the end of this video because here I'll break down steps you can take to finally take control of your finances. So before we begin, I'm going to open up a little bit and share a little bit about my personal story with my own financial struggles. And my hope in doing so is that by being transparent with you and sharing my journey, I can show you that the steps that I mention later are the real things that I've done to dramatically improve my financial situation. And I truly believe that anyone can follow in my footsteps and make the changes I did. So not too long ago, things on the outside looked pretty good for me. I had a new house, a safe job. There was just one catch. I was constantly stressed out about money. I always felt broke. I always felt like I was living paycheck to paycheck, and I felt like I was being held captive by my job. At this point, I was making good money, but I was working a lot of hours. I would easily put in 50 to 60 hours a week, and I was just burnt out. As unhappy or unfulfilled as I felt going to work every day, I couldn't quit. I needed that paycheck. And this realization hit me like a ton of bricks when about 4 months after closing on my house, I got laid off from my safe job. And to add insult to injury, I had put nearly all of my savings into buying and renovating my house. And so I didn't have much of an emergency fund. And on top of that, I got basically no severance. And so I had this oh crap moment because it made me realize I was living this life where I was completely dependent on my salary. I couldn't even take a few weeks off between when I got laid off and trying to find a new job because I needed to pay my bills the next month. Luckily, I found another job pretty quickly, but that was a really big wake-up call for me to need to reevaluate a lot of things in my life, especially my relationship with money. And so what I needed to do was get in control of my finances instead of feeling like it was controlling me. So I sat down, I went through a series of exercises, and I do these same things every year, usually in the beginning of the year. And doing these has allowed me to be on a path towards more financial freedom. And I'll explain everything in this video, and my hope in doing so is that it will help some of you out there who feel stuck. If you're not happy with your financial situation, but you're not really sure where to begin to change that. First up is do a financial checkup. Just like hopefully every year you go to the doctor for a wellness exam and you take your car in for regular maintenance, the same should go for your finances. Taking control of your finances starts with taking a close look at your current financial situation, even if it's uncomfortable. If you're in a serious relationship and you share money with your spouse or partner, then this is a great opportunity to talk about financial goals for the year and make sure you're both on the same page. Take a weekend to look at your spending habits, look at your savings habits, discuss your future goals for big purchases, vacations, retirement, and so on. You might realize you're spending more money than you think on certain things, and that's affecting your ability to save. Something I do every year is look at all of my credit card and bank year-end statements. Banks will actually provide me with a really big, long statement with all of the transactions from the previous year. And banks will just automatically provide it to you, usually in the beginning of January or February. But if you want to check this at any point in the year, you can usually just log into your online portal and get the same information whenever you want. And it's really eye-opening because when you're making purchases one at a time, it doesn't really register how much you're spending, but once you see it all there summarized for you, including the categories where you spend your money, it can be really shocking. If you're struggling to find room in your budget to save money, then I really recommend this and use this to set a realistic budget. It actually leads into the second thing that I do every year, which is reevaluate my budget. So for example, if you set a budget to spend $500 a month on groceries, but in reality, based on your credit card statements, say you're spending $700 a month, then you need to either figure out if you're just overspending on food and see if there's a way to reduce your grocery bill, or just adjust your budget and raise it to $700 and make it a point to stick to that. So the point is that you're seeing where you're spending your money and making sure it's factored into your budget. If you need to add $200 a month to your grocery budget, then you might need to take a look at other areas where you can reduce spending by $200 to make up for it. And when you're setting a budget, there are a lot of different budgeting strategies out there, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to making sure you're allocating money to things that are important to you and not wasting it on things that don't really add value to your life. So if you want to take a big vacation or buy a car or a house or make sure your retirement accounts are funded, you need to make sure your budget is set up to allow you to save money towards those goals. And that may mean cutting back on some of the more frivolous spending that we're all guilty of. Next, I set an emergency fund. So I talked about not having a lot of money in my emergency fund when I got laid off, and that's because I didn't really have an emergency fund. I just had a savings account, and I wasn't differentiating between money that I was setting aside for future purchases, such as buying a house, versus money I was setting aside for an emergency. And so when you're creating an emergency fund, I really recommend using a high yield savings account. Overall, right now, savings accounts are not earning much interest because interest rates are just low across the board. But I really like Wealthfront and Yada for savings accounts. There are so many others out there, so just do a little bit of research and find the right one for you. If you're curious about either of Wealthfront or Yada, I'll put links to them in the description and you can read about them and see if you want to try them out. So the general rule of thumb is to have 3 to 6 months of basic living expenses saved in your emergency fund. If you're familiar with Dave Ramsey, he actually just suggests putting $1,000 into your emergency fund while you're paying off debt. But I think to be safe, you should put 3 months of basic living expenses at a minimum. So however much you'd need to pay for 3 months of rent, car payments, grocery bills, utilities, things like that. That's just my preference though, so contribute what you want to your emergency fund as long as you have something set aside that you don't touch. Next, I look at all of my debt and formulate a plan to get out of that debt. Now, I actually did this a few years ago when I first set my goal of retiring early. And the first step of that was getting out of debt as soon as possible so that I can take the money that I was contributing to my debt and reallocate that money to investments. That meant paying off my car, credit cards, and student loans. And so after I took a look at all of my debt, I set a plan that I knew would take a few years for me to pay everything off. And so what I do now is just check my get out of debt plan and make sure I'm on track or make any adjustments for the year as needed. And one tip I want to offer, if you're doing this for the first time, my recommendation is to come up with a get out of debt plan that's realistic. So depending on how much debt you have and what you can afford to pay towards that debt, it's okay if it's going to take a few years. You want it to be a plan that's sustainable, and it might be overwhelming at first. If you're not sure where to get started, then I really recommend reading a book called I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi, which is the first book that I read when I started my journey towards financial freedom a few years ago. I'll put a link in the description of this video for anyone who wants to check it out. You can also check out Dave Ramsey's Baby Steps, which include some strategies that he recommends for paying off debt. And finally, the last thing I do is see if I'm on track for retirement. I was recently introduced to the FIRE community, not that kind of fire. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. And the idea of retiring early sounded really attractive to me, but I needed to figure out how much money I needed to save for retirement to be able to live comfortably off of my investments and not need to work. How much a person needs saved for retirement is highly individual. It really depends on your lifestyle, family situation, do you have kids, etc. The quickest way to get a ballpark of your retirement number is to use your retirement calculator, which I'll put a link to in the description. Just keep in mind, these are general rules and there are situations where it doesn't apply to everyone. So just make sure you're taking into account all factors for your individual situation, including the age you plan to retire, whether or not you can access your retirement accounts, or if you need other investments to live off of while you wait to become eligible to withdraw money from your 401ks or IRAs, and take into account any lifestyle changes you expect later in life, and especially things like inflation. And listen, this is going to take some time. There's no one size fits all approach when it comes to managing money. It's taken me a few years to get from where I was to where I am, and I'm still in the process of some of these steps. I still have student loan debt. I'm still catching up on my retirement contributions to be on track for my retirement goal. I've made mistakes along the way, I've hit bumps in the road, and I've had to make a lot of sacrifices. The point is, the journey is going to be difficult, but that doesn't mean it's not worth doing. I know it sounds cheesy, but when it comes to money, it's true that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So I hope you took some actionable steps from this video to make sure that what you're doing with your money today is going to get you where you want to be in the future. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments or direct message me on Instagram. As always, if you found this video helpful, please make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next one.